Good afternoon, I'm Reverend Dave Thompson. I'd like to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible Study. I'm a civil human minister, so what that means is that I focus my ministry on building human peace and common ground. And in this Bible study, as a civil human minister, the way I'm approaching these scriptures today is I want to do that in two ways. One, the first is to be human. I want to approach this just like you as a human being and to try to find those teachings that are the kind of teachings that we can share across the board to all humans. And I also want to do this in the second way, and that is being civil, and that's respecting our basic shared human needs. Those needs like being able to believe what we need to about our creed, the big unanswered questions, being independent from the control of others and intimidation, being able to vote for the person who will have control over us, being able to intimately love the person that we want to choose, and then last, living our life the way that we want to. So those are the ways that I'm trying to approach this study today. Right now we're talking about Matthew chapter 12, and Jesus in the last show actually ends up rebuking and calling the Pharisees, the religious leaders, sons of snakes, or brood of vipers is the term that's often used to translate it. And today he's actually going to go a bit of a step further and really address something that the kingdom of Israel, the people of Israel have felt, but they haven't been able to say yet. So let's go ahead and start with the verse, and that's chapter 12, verse 43 through 45. When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places, seeking rest, and finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house, from which I came, and when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. So shall it also be with this wicked generation. So I'll be honest with you, this particular passage was, because it's an allegory or a metaphor in some ways, it was really hard to know what in the world Jesus is talking about here. And it has to do with a lot of history involved in the Jewish community, in the Jewish culture. And I want to talk about that a little bit. But first, I want to just talk about a couple of the words that are used here. We've heard the word unclean spirit before, and literally what it translates out as is being impure breath or wind or life force. We don't really know if Jesus is talking about like a literal demon the way we think of them these days, as these smaller, lesser gods that are under the rule of Satan. But what we do know is that he at least is addressing a situation that is out of control and that is not controlled by the person, and then it's yielding bad things in their life. So that's what he means. And so we have this spirit leaves this person, and evidently the person cleans up their life and straightens their life out and turns their life around. And then this unclean spirit who's going around doesn't find any water, it says, that it's dry. Essentially, remember, in this ancient Israel place, it's very desolate. Water is a significant commodity. We're in Seattle here in Marymore Park. You'll notice that everything is green here, right? So there's so much water here, so it's not something we think about. But their water is precious. And so when they say dry, they mean dangerous. And this spirit then ends up coming back. He likes the place now, and he brings 7 other demons with him. So what in the world is Jesus talking about? And this is a lot of the history that is really important in the Jewish culture. This has to do with what's called the Babylonian captivity. So what this means is several hundred years before Jesus comes on the scene, the Jewish community, the Jewish culture, the kingdom of Israel is going through some significant problems with regard to their religion and their faith. They've begun to accept other sort of cultural gods in their practice of worship, and that becomes upsetting for some of the prophets of the one God that they're supposed to worship. And so we have this prophet Isaiah who says, because you are worshiping all these other gods, God is going to take you out and send you out into a desolate wilderness. So what happens? The kingdom of Babylon, which is a literal kingdom out there who had control, a lot like the Roman Empire. There were these rise and falls of culture, but this Babylonian kingdom, they came to Israel, and what they did Their method of taking over a country was to take the younger people and to take the intellectual people, or the people who are of a higher caste in their society, and then they would take them to their culture and they would teach them how to read, teach them how to write, give them the ability to know how to organize and do politics, and then those people would be sent back when they were ready. And so what happened was they took all of the sort of elite religious leaders, they took a lot of what was the religious elements of Israel and sent them to Babylon. And so this is what I believe, and a lot of scholars really think is what Jesus is talking about, right? This unclean spirit, which is kind of crazy that Jesus calls the religious components unclean, they go to Babylon, right? They're going out in the desert, wandering around. And then when they're ready, they end up coming back to Israel. And it's interesting that Jesus points out that Israel was really well put together, organized, and swept and clean when they're coming back. And so when they come back, they're bringing all of that Babylonian concept, all the concepts of religion, the concepts of politics, and not only that, but they bring all of their leadership, they bring all of their councils down with them. So what in the world does Jesus mean by this? What does this have to do with what's happening right now? Jesus is acknowledging that this religious component, the church, if you will, of the kingdom of Israel at the time, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, had developed this significant routine of religion and practices. And Jesus is pointing out that this is not necessary. All that they brought back with them, all of this complication, all of this administration and rules and rituals don't really matter. What matters is what Jesus is trying to do, and that is getting to the people who are suffering in society, the sick, the mentally ill, the widows, the orphans, the people who truly need something. And so Jesus is pointing out to these Pharisees, all of your religious pomp and circumstance, all the things that you thought were so significant and so important and so beneficial to Israel have actually corrupted this country, because what you've done is created a system that causes all of these people to suffer and is outcasting all of these people because they can't live by these rules that you've set in motion. They can't live in this system that you've established. What does this have to do with us here and now, right? I mean, this is 2,000 years ago in a culture that really doesn't look a whole lot like us, but it does. It looks a lot like us. We are exactly the same people, and we can look at this example as a method to see how we approach humanity today. And I truly believe a lot of our religion, a lot of our organization, the pomp and circumstance and ritual that we think is so important is not important, and in fact detracts from the things that we as good human beings are supposed to do. And that is to have a happy society, to be a happy person. We create peace, we create love, we show compassion, we show humility. And that means that rather than going to church and doing all these rituals on Sunday and, praying for a certain length of time or, meditating for a certain amount of hours, that's not what we need to do. We need to help those who are truly suffering in our society right here and now. I so appreciate that you're joining me in this Bible study, and this has been such an encouragement for me. I know personally, looking at these things, it's just been shocking to me to see how similar we really are, that the human being hasn't really changed on the whole. And so it's great to come and to look at these, the way that Jesus is talking about changing society. And there's so many relevant concepts today. So I appreciate you being a part of that self-discovery for me. And I know a lot of you have communicated back to me that it's been really helpful for you. So thank you for that. So until tomorrow, 12 noon, live on Facebook, we'll be in a different location. I want to say to you that I love you. And I hope that you choose to love yourself. It is the only love that we have any control over in this world. And now I invite you to join me as we go about the rest of our day. loving our neighbors the same way. Thank you.